Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, colleagues, dear friends. We'll just take a couple of minutes for everyone to settle down in the Zoom platform, and then we'll proceed with the presentation. Excellent. I think we are done. It's a great pleasure to lead this webinar. My name is Yunus Sarıkan. I'm Director of Global Advocacy at ICLE, Local Governance for Sustainability, and I'm also the focal point for the LGMA constituency. This webinar is part of our monthly webinar series since the beginning of the year. And obviously, because COP is just concluded, this time we will have more emphasis or focus on what has happened at COP and how we can take key messages. And obviously, considering that the COP is just concluded on Sunday, there are a lot of organizations who are still trying to assess. Even the ISD summary was just released this morning, so it will still take time. So this is the first attempt. Obviously, there should be more information coming up in the next couple of days and weeks, probably. But I think this is just an immediate assessment. I'm very happy that my colleague Kobe Brown will also join us from ICLE Cities Biodiversity Center, who will also take us to the preparation for the biodiversity COP15 in Montreal next month. So immediately we finish the climate COP, we will also focus on the biodiversity COP as well. Just for those who have been involved in this presentation or webinars, this is recorded. We recommend you to raise your points or remarks either in the chat box or Q&A box, but we recommend you to have the discussion at the end so that we can have a more easier, let's say, overview of all the topics that will be presented. But if there's any burning issues, feel free to join and raise your hands as well. I also would like to ask your patience because I am going through a bit heavy flu. It was not at COP27. I know a lot of colleagues have tested positive and they had severe difficulties. Mine has become just afterwards. So I will try to be as concise as possible. In the morning session, I already had made a mistake. I forgot to turn on the slides. This time we avoided this. So my friend Patricia will help us to go through the slides as well. So once again, bear with us if there are any voice or energy weaknesses during the presentation. We're trying to keep up as much as possible. So Patricia, let's go to the next slide. So those who have come, we are the LGMA, the Voice of Cities and Regions in the UNFCCC process. We have been involved in this process since '95, one of the first constituencies. Now there are 9 constituencies in the UNFCCC process. Our main tasks, our main goals are we try to influence the negotiations by making sure that those decisions are reflecting to our priorities and the needs, but we also try to share our information so that the decisions are much more appropriately adopted, so that they are also reflecting to the realities of our constituencies. So I see a message from Daval. I think we could discuss this in the next Q&A session, Daval. I see you're promoting one initiative, but let's talk about it later on. Let's not disturb. Let's focus on COP27 at the moment. We also, especially since Paris Agreement adopted, there is an important agenda item, action agenda, which is mainly the partnerships for initiatives and coalitions. We have been involved in that to the various degrees. Obviously, every COP is led by a presidency and their priorities, their style of working is also, each of them are different. We do our best to accommodate and we do our best to respond in this process. And finally, we also would like to continue to keep our dialogue to the Friends of Multi-Level Action, which are the countries, parties in the UNFCCC process, who are believing in the value of multi-level action, both at home and in the UNFCCC process. So next slide, please. For those who have who'd like to go through what has happened every day, we have our daily mailing, the LGMA daily mailing. You can go through these. It is the coverage of the negotiations, how we were engaged in negotiations. Obviously, core part of it is our multi-level action pavilion, but we also wanted to track what has happened in other pavilions, try to capture the tweet of the day or others as well. So this will be a source that is useful for you later on as well. Next slide. So how did we start to approach the COP27? Let's remember, in Glasgow, we had achieved our goal that multi-level action is enshrined in the preamble of the Glasgow Climate Pact. So it is a new era. The second phase of the Paris Agreement is to be built in this principle of multi-level action. Therefore, we defined our motto as multi-level action delivers, and we primarily focused on NDCs, but with a specific focus on those who have made commitments like Race to Zero, Rise to Resilience, or any other initiatives announced in Glasgow should be reflected to the NDCs. That was the most basic recommendation or expectation. So that this would be the first expectation on NDCs. There was an important agenda, which is an unfinished business of climate emergency. We all agreed that Glasgow was making the negotiation process going forward, or let's say, taking the Paris Agreement to the next phase, but it was not addressing the climate emergency. Therefore, we wanted to have topics like food, nature, adaptation, circularity, culture, waste and consumption to be much more visible into the COP27 agenda, including strong emphasis on loss and damage and migration, particularly with the leadership of Scotland. We wanted to have this first ever climate and urbanization ministerial. This was our goal for many years, and during the year it was really involved very positively. And of course, this was Africa COP. We had to respond to the call of Africa to be much more visible, but we also wanted to engage with our partners in Mediterranean and MENA region as well. Next slide, please. Obviously, this was our beginning starting point, let's say, but the more we have advanced the COP27, especially building on our experiences with the presidency, especially since June, we tried to granularize what we have been asking for. First of all, we said that Surge is an important initiative. We will go into the Surge a bit more. We want this not just a presidency initiative or not just an LGMA supported process, but across the governments, and should be also endorsing it. We wanted to be, we wanted this climate and urbanization ministerial to be welcomed by parties, that this is something that they find a value in it, and that they take the conclusions into their negotiations as well. And finally, we wanted climate emergency finance, especially Article 6.8, the non-market approach, but also loss and damage to be an element of climate emergency finance. Next step. The next slide, please. Before going further in the details, let's have a bird's eye view of what has happened in COP27. As I said, there may be other interpretations. We wanted this to be like a first-hand. So feel free to share with us your assessment later on, that we compile it collectively. So first of all, this was the first COP in the Global South since 2016. Chile was trying to host it. Logistically, they went to Madrid, but still, Chile was an OECD country. Therefore, it was still not fully Global South. And obviously, after 6 years later, Global South taking the leadership, they wanted to make their positions heard. This was the highest number of participation after Glasgow across the 27 COPs. This was number 2 in terms of participants. Of course, this has resulted technical and logistical challenges, which was, in fact, to be realistic, one of the hardest COP in terms of the space and logistical challenges. And above all, geopolitically, this COP was unique because of the war, Russian war in Ukraine, which had consequences on energy and climate and in food prices, which had also introduced a new dynamism in the global geopolitics. Of course, the global south has also been part of these discussions. So it was particularly difficult, especially knowing that even the most ambitious countries had to step back, that they have turned into natural gas, liquid natural gas, for example, in Germany, or even reconsidering some of their coal power plants. Obviously, before COP, there was before COP27, there was a backtracking in the actions, maybe not commitment, but actions of the countries. We all remember we were always asking for removing of fossil fuel subsidies, but when energy prices rocketed across the world, every government considered subsidies to the fuel price, which was so that the consumers were not that much feeling the impact of this change. So it was really a unique moment. So let's consider COP under these conditions. So if we look at the COP27 cover decision, Sharm el-Sheikh Implementation Plan, which is abbreviated as SHIP, and I must confess, the abbreviation of the presidency is really very interesting. They're much more better than any of the UNFCCC abbreviations, much more meaningful and much more interesting. So the cover decision, the immediate thing that strikes us is that there are references in a very strong manner to food, nature-based solutions, and other topics that has not been on the table so far. There are 4 references to renewable energy. It seems it is probably one of the most ambitious COP in terms of acknowledging renewable energy across the whole COP cover decisions. It was 0. There was 0 references to renewable energy in Glasgow. So if we look at that, these are fulfilling our expectations of our LGMA multi-level action delivers vision, so that we were saying that if COP has to go to climate emergency mode, or the UNFCCC process has to go to emergency mode, they have to address these topics. Second, the phrase multi-level action and the text from the Glasgow Climate Pact is back after our efforts, but unfortunately, I think it is a bit weakening now because it is one of the operative paragraph referring to paragraph 51, and it is under the chapter action by non-party stakeholders. The reason why it is a bit disappointing is that the term multi-level action is not just applying only to local and regional governments. It also applies to the national government, that they should also embrace this vision. So limiting to only non-party stakeholders' actions is, for us, a bit narrowing down and weakening the importance of multi-level action. But we all know the cover decision was already, it was a very, very delayed process. There was not too much time as we had Glasgow. We were not able to interact with the negotiators. So everybody suffered a lot. So I think we just have to live what we had at the moment. More importantly, over this couple of months, we were always saying to the presidency that especially with the Ministerial of Urbanization in the last day of COP, we were telling them that if there is a risk, if you make a big shot like the Ministerial of Urbanization the last day, it is too late to influence the negotiation or outcome document. We were always recommending, or we were always telling the presidency that we would have hoped, because the presidency is involved with so many initiatives, and especially Surge is one of the most ambitious ones, when they release their cover decision text, a reference to Surge, a reference to ministerial would already be incorporated into this text. However, presidency, the Egyptian presidency, have taken a different approach. They did not impose their initiatives into the decision text, the cover decision text. I must confess, if this was not coming from the presidency, it will be very difficult for others to support them. This was the case in the case of UK presidency in Glasgow, for example. They inserted the breakthrough agenda since the beginning of the text, It was resisted by parties, then it was removed to a footnote, but later on it was back into the text in COP27. So it should have been much more helpful for us if the presidency had put the references, we will go through that, the text again, what we would have liked to see into the text. The good news is that there is a recognition of surge and a number of other initiatives by the presidency in the COP27 Global Climate Action Outcomes. So there's a list of initiatives. We were aware some of those COP presidency initiatives will not have too much lifespan, but surge and among them others have been recognized in the Global Climate Action Outcomes. We will touch upon the breakthrough agenda later on. Loss and damage fund, it is surprising, and it is positively surprising, a very challenging agenda, a very difficult agenda like loss and damage fund has been inserted into the agenda upon amendments, and at the same COP the decision was adopted. So it is probably one of the most rapidly evolving decision. This shows how it was important for the global south that loss and damage was an extremely valuable and extremely critical element of COP27 outcome. The very likely the sentiment was that we will not go to the second phase of the Paris Agreement if you do not address climate justice, if you do not address loss and damage fund. And if you read the text of loss and damage fund, the procedure that was listed, which is expected to be concluded in 12 months, it is also very rapid time span. If you look at how Green Climate Fund was created, how Adaptation Fund was created, they took much longer period. So if the decision is implemented as it is adopted, it will be one of the fastest implemented decision of the COP. Obviously, the discussion on loss and damage has created huge tectonic changes in the global alliances. EU was the first country or group who have adopted that they will support from the global north this loss and damage fund. It was not the case in Glasgow. Even Africa had sacrificed in Glasgow that they can accept a Glasgow outcome without loss and damage. But the moment EU showed the signal, which had its conditions, for example, the incomes or the funding sources of this fund should not be limited to just the global north and not even limited to the national budgets of the global north, such as trade and multi-level finance procedures. So as soon as also the small island states start to say that they welcome this decision, this created a huge discussion with the G7 and China as well. So both global north and both global south started to have different alliances, cross-fertilization of alliances. This is, of course, in line with what we are seeing around the world now. A new wave of multilateralism is shaping. The traditional country groupings are changing. The discussion on loss and damage was just reflecting this. More importantly, I think that point is much more important. The climate community, through this loss and damage fund, has for the first time started to show their muscles into processes that is beyond their mandates, which is multilateral trade and banking system. This is unique. Obviously, climate change processes, ministers of climate, they have certain mandate. The discussions on trade, banking system, Bretton Woods institution are beyond the mandates of climate ministers. However, the debate on loss and damage became so important in the future of the survival of many countries that through this climate process they started to question and even change this global multilateral system. The Prime Minister of Barbados has been one of the most vocal ones on that. Of course, if you remember, climate change in the 1990s has first influenced debate on energy. Renewable energy became much more stronger with the climate change concerns. Then the climate change, low carbon transition also changed the discussion of technology, electrification, low emission technology. So the climate debate has spillover effect in many sectors. So this, with the loss and damage fund, for the first time, climate community is influencing or trying to influence the global architecture of the multilateral finance system. That is for us, I think, the most important thing. The global goal on adaptation is including a reference to cities, settlements, and infrastructure, as well as tangible cultural heritage. We have to congratulate our Climate Heritage Network, who have been instrumental in this achievement. Obviously, the Article 6.8 non-market approaches. There were back and forth. We were very happy that this local was included as one of the options. However, the list has been scrapped. That was not brought to the table. This means we can still bring back the new market mechanism, new market approaches. We still believe, as LGMA, local could be one of the first examples of sustainable urbanization as a non-market approaches. We could definitely work with our colleagues in the UN Capital Development Fund how we can revise or rephrase this paragraph so that this serves also to our expectations as well, and therefore this postponement could be even an opportunity for us so that in the next couple of months, when we advance in the negotiations, we can bring this to the table again. In conclusion, with COP26 and COP27, which are addressing both ambition and climate justice, this successful delivery of the second phase of the Paris Agreement clearly depends on finance, governance, and capacity building. So there's no question about how to go forward or where to go forward, but the enabling environment, especially finance architecture, the governance and capacity building, the technologies or procedures to support implementation is becoming or are becoming much more important. In that sense, multi-level action delivers will play a key role in this process as well. Next slide, please. So let's focus on how we have acted or performed in Glasgow, sorry, Sharm el-Sheikh. As we all have been discussing, we are talking about a process that is in two phases, the blue zone, the UNFCCC accredited negotiation, and the green zone. This year, green zone activities were extremely limited. We didn't have relations with the city of Sharm el-Sheikh, unfortunately. Even the governor of South Sinai was not too much involved in the whole planning or activities of the COP. So this led us that 95% of our activities were in the blue zone. Of course, multi-level action pavilion became our home for all our constituency, and we had been involved in the UNFCCC, both negotiations and the president's activities and the Marrakesh partnership, but there were numerous activities in other pavilions as well. Next slide, please. We would like to welcome and especially express our deepest appreciation to all our partners, especially our host Scottish government, our collaborative partners as Minister of Housing in Egypt, COP27 Presidency, Marrakesh Partnership, and all those 45+ partners who have dedicated time and energy and resources to the success of the multi-level action pavilion to make it truly the home for cities and regions at the blue zone in Sharm el-Sheikh. What we have assessed is that we have more than 500 delegations that may be registered either through LGMA or by parties. We had more than 150 political leaders, mayors, governors, councillors across the world. And of course, we had more than 50 sessions in the pavilion, but the numerous events, I think we have reached to around 200 overall, the number of meetings that the LGMA constituencies have had across the 2 weeks of the COP27. Next slide, please. Obviously, Surge and the ministerial was our biggest, let's say, center of gravity for our efforts. I am really very proud that Surge has turned out to be one of the largest collaboration on the urban and climate space. With that regard, we'd like to really express once again our appreciation to the presidency who have given the trust and the opportunity for us. You can see the steering committee members, the co-leaders of the steering committee members. You can see the partners, more than 100 now who have endorsed, and an impressive ministerial meeting on urbanization. It was one of the only events which is focusing on action agenda, but it was in the negotiation zone. It was in a room that was packed full of ministers and LGMA and other representatives. There were queues outside the room. There was a very strong sentiment inside the room from the speakers that this is something that has been longing for so long, and now it's time to make this kind of interaction more effective in the years to come. In that regard, let's remember the surge is important because it's the first time in the climate space we are approaching urbanization and multi-level action and sustainable cities in a more holistic way. It has to be recognized that at the same time, there was also the summary for urban policymakers of the IPCC report was also released. So these two processes, in fact, are helping each other so that the knowledge base and the action agenda is getting much more closer. We have heard strong support from the Global South, especially from the ministers of urbanization, but also ministers of climate. But it was also very, very encouraging to see endorsements from several global North countries. For example, the US delegation has clearly stated that they look forward to a synergy between their initiative that was launched at COP27. The scale is the US initiative and the surge, so that it could be considered as a national supplement. Or Japan, they expressed very clearly that their traditional international city-to-city cooperation could also benefit from the active engagement with surge. So these are all giving us very positive signals that this is something on the right track, that we have to build upon it. And for me, the most surprising statement came from the multilateral development banks, European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, on their behalf, expressed a very strong support and endorsement to the surge initiative. This is, of course, very valuable because this was not a commitment initiative. This was an action, an implementation initiative, similar to the spirit of COP27. And for implementation, we definitely need investments in big scales. Let's remember, none of the Race to Zero or the Race to Resilience, which was mainly a commitment by the cities, did not receive endorsement from these multilateral development banks. So bringing their perspective and recognizing their appreciation of our work is really helpful, that we should build upon in the future. Let's continue. Obviously, surge is still open for endorsements. We have more than 100 already. You can also acknowledge the call to action of LGMA that was championed by Mayor Dijksma. This was also powerful for us. We had more than 50 mayors and local and regional governments leaders who have been endorsing this process. Their endorsement also will feed into the surge. And those who would like to receive more information, you can find our LGMA Surge Hub, where you can both access the press release. You will also see in a short couple of days the video of the recording of the ministerial, but also you can access to the surge endorsement form from this LGMA Surge Hub as well. So we would like to keep this more a living document or living space, so that we can expand further the surge in the days to come. Next, please. This is a list of our leaders, LGMA leaders, intervening in the official UNFCCC agenda. This is not the side event. This is either in the official negotiations where their inputs are recorded and their submissions are recorded, or like Global Climate Action Agenda, that they are playing a huge role. I am very happy. I will not read all of them, but from Tokyo to Lusaka, from Chefchaouen to Machakos County, Kenya, from Mozambique, Quelimane to Dhaka North, or Mayor of Auckland, Libby Sharp, or Utrecht, there was a strong diversity in terms of gender, in terms of the typology of our members, in terms of regional balance. I think we have demonstrated that the LGMA is a strong constituency with its diversity, and the messages of our leaders were well received both by those in the rooms, and some of them will even shape some of the discussions in the future. In that regard, I would like to especially express our deepest support for those leaders who have really paid a huge sacrifice. For example, Mayor Vincent Chauvet, who waited for hours and hours and hours, the long night of the 20th of November, or Mayor Sifiani, who waited for 4 hours in order to deliver his 2-minute intervention. That is, in fact, really the beauty and the beast of the interventions in the UNFC space. This is making a bit difficult, but that's one of the core elements why we are attending this meeting, so that we secure our space, that we deliver really our messages to the parties. Next. So let's remember, the text, the first elements text was released on the 15th of November, which is Tuesday. It was already delayed in the process because by the time in Glasgow, a full text was already released, so we could influence the decisions. Of course, when this text came so late, it was also difficult for us, and we were not ready because we were focusing on the ministerial. It was really a challenge for us to incorporate the key expectation that urbanization becomes an essential element of implementation and ambition of Paris Agreement, that surge and first ever urbanization and climate ministerial should be welcomed by parties, and urbanization should be a new theme under the topics of the UNFCCC. These were our main languages that we would like to see in the cover decision. However, because of this back and forth, none of them were reflected. However, it's still not over, and I would like to go to the next slide. When we are discussing the surge and the ministerial, I think it's time for us to recap how did this action agenda evolve in time. It is the right moment, I think, to rethink of this. If we look back, it was going back to 10 years ago. In 2012 onwards, there was this ADP negotiation, the workstream 2, which was the pre-2020 ambition. In that process, we had the first workshop in Warsaw. It was in 2013, COP18. That was the moment where we first acknowledged or put forward our proposal for urbanization, climate communities getting together through the ministerial meeting as well. This was followed by the forum in Bonn by the SP48. However, when we went to Lima, Lima was difficult because there was already a very tense debate. The parties were not recognizing any of the action agendas or any of the stakeholders until they secured that NDCs will be national driven and there will be no top-down approach from the UN system, and there will be no compliance. The moment in Lima this understanding was revealed, which was the building block of the Paris Agreement, the action agenda became much more active. The action agenda has become clear that whatever NDCs take shape, action agenda will not have a direct influence as long as parties or nations do not incorporate them into their own planning. That was the reason why Lima Paris Action Agenda is then connected to the high-level climate action champions, and both of them in 2016 merged under the Marrakesh Partnership. Under the Marrakesh Partnership, it was mainly thematic areas that was focusing on mitigation, that was pre-2020 mitigation perspectives. In that sense, we said that it doesn't make sense to address human settlements on its own, and especially knowing that built environment, the global ABC, the Global Alliance for Building and Construction, has mentioned them as a core mitigation sector. We also redesigned the human settlements so that there is a second group which is focusing on waste and consumption as another sector, which is coming from our constituency. But it was not a constituency-based process. In Madrid, there was a climate ambition coalition. This now ambitious commitments for 2030 started to come up, and the Marrakesh Partnership also reached to its 5-year action plan. So it became much more confident that Marrakesh Partnership will take this further. In 2020, we have been invited to join the Race to Zero. We have developed all the processes. In Glasgow, there was this breakthroughs, which was an evolution of this thematic discussion, but much more in important sectors, a couple of selected sectors. The breakthrough agenda was only recognized in the Glasgow Climate Plan as a footnote. The parties did not want to acknowledge this in the body text of the Glasgow Climate Pact. And when we came to Sharm el-Sheikh, now what we have achieved is that there is an adaptation agenda which combines race to resilience as well. There is a breakthrough agenda, but the breakthrough is in fact twofold. It is that one breakthrough agenda is for the nations, This is focusing on 5 sectors, and in that sense, there are still discussions that the built environment or buildings are still not receiving a breakthrough agenda yet. That is one part of the story. And then there's another part of the story. It's the breakthrough agendas by the non-party stakeholders like LGMA or other constituencies. And this also has numerous themes, but these are not the same. And this became very clear that this will be now the new challenge, how we will navigate these breakthrough agendas by the parties and by the market partnership or high-level champions in the years to come. And that's why engagement of surge in the list of global climate action agenda is something positive, but it has to be assessed under this condition. And once again, the important thing is that every year, as you have noticed, the construction of the action agenda, the way the partners are dealing is changing. It's like a living organism. And therefore, we could also expect what we have kicked off with surge and what we have kicked with urbanization could have a different shape in the years to come, provided that we support this process. And that takes me to my last slide for COP27. Next, please. Good. So taking into account all these global outcomes, our activities, what could be the initial elements of our vision towards COP28? Once again, this is just the beginning. We will have to develop this together as we have done in the past. But let's start with some of the first items. First of all, multi-level action delivers is still relevant. I think we do not need a new motto because the multi-level action is literally starting to be shaping up now. Therefore, we can stick to this. We have to operationalize surge. We will have to deal how this relates to the high-level champions breakthrough agendas. As we have said before, the buildings have not achieved their breakthroughs. At a certain moment in time, there was a discussion about urban breakthroughs. Maybe the surge could be also considered as an urban breakthrough in COP28 or even COP29. We don't know this. But we have to make sure throughout the year we create the appropriate synergy with the second UN Habitat Assembly on the 5th to 9th of June and SP58 in Bonn, which is 5th to 14th of June. The reason I'm saying is that obviously surge is in collaboration with the UN Habitat and facilitated by ICLE, and we are now both joining the Secretariat together. The way UN Habitat Assembly will embrace surge and how much they will insist to continue this in the climate debate will be important. Unfortunately, there is an overlap because while the urban community is in Nairobi on the first week, the climate negotiators will continue to talk in Bonn. So we have to make sure there is a synergy between these two processes. In that regard, we will try to make sure the daring cities, the annual forum of daring cities could be a mechanism that can bridge these two processes. On the loss and damage fund, obviously we have to continue our active engagement, and I think we have to particularly support the leadership by Scotland. During the COP27, they released a number of reports, a number of important statements. I think we can be much more actively supporting Scotland in that process. Dubai is the next host. It is a different compared to Sharm el-Sheikh. It is much more. It has the resources and its influence is much more different than Sharm el-Sheikh. Dubai is member of C40. In Egypt, we had no membership of any of the cities. We have to consider this means that our agenda in the green zone may be a bit more increased during the COP28. Obviously, we have to, I think everybody believes that we should continue with the multi-level action pavilion, and we could even expand it in terms of its features, that everybody is comfortable that this is the space that we have. Again, on focusing on Article 6.8 is priority for us. And all these things brings us to the stocktake for climate emergency. This is a process that will occupy the rest of 2023. This is the political momentum that the LGMA can introduce to the global stocktake. At the moment, it is still technical level. The political momentum is exactly what the UNFCCC Executive Secretary has already addressed. So next slide will be again just a brief assessment of what we can expect from COP20 stocktake for climate emergency. We have built this in the logic of Talanoa. Where are we? Where do we want to go? And how do we get there? And we recommend any local or regional stock they could focus on national NDCs, how it's related to your jurisdictions, your commitments 2030 and 2050, and how they address climate justice domestically, at home, under your cities, in your urban communities, but also globally. And let's remember, this is something that the UNFCCC have asked us to bring back to the table. We have asked them to open the space to the local level, and now we have to deliver this. In that regard, next slide will be my last slide. We would encourage all partners to really plan for at least one event, one-day event in every capital of their countries for such a mobilization, preferably before the June session. And very likely will be peaking at the Earth Day 2023. We could also make use of Urban October as an important agenda item. And the logic is that if we make a very lively debate of global topic at the local level, we can make sure COP28 in Dubai, which will be the political global stocktake, more ambitious. And in that sense, and when you design any event, we recommend you to take into account the IPCC Summary for Urban Policymakers. You go engage with your youth constituency to reflect their future expectations that the decision making they should be involved. And we also recommend legislative bodies like Globe International to join us, because multi-level stocktake is definitely needing their input as well. With this, I am now finishing my presentation. Teresa has put a question box. Teresa, if you want, you can also speak. Patricia, we can give Teresa the yeah, she has raised hand. Maybe she speaks directly.
Hi, Yunus, and apologies for the sound because I'm connected from the bus. First of all, million thanks for your work and the work of the entire LGMA community. I mean, it was great to meet you all there. And I just wanted to add something on adaptation, because even if the wording on the Glasgow Climate Pact is not there in the Sharm el-Sheikh implementation plan, in the decision on the GGA, there are quite positive aspects. So the GGA framework will have cities as a theme. The Secretariat will also organize 4 or 3 workshops in 2023, and we will also have the opportunity to do a contribution to the UNFCCC before by the end of February. So I think in this regard, I still need to sit down with Eloise from Regions 4 and see how we go about it. But we will of course work on this and share with the entire LGMA for your inputs, because I assume we would like to submit something in February, and also of course participate in the workshop. So it was only that. And in terms of our inputs to the cover decision, I think for next year we could maybe, it's a bit sad, but sometimes I have the feeling we need to give the presidency something that they can copy paste. So it's what I saw from the UNGOs. I saw the document they wanted to have, the paragraphs that they wanted to have in the cover decision, and they're all there. Of course, the youth envoy was in their delegation, so that was easier. But I think we should all work together to have something before we go to COP, so that when parties start fighting over loss and damage and mitigation, etc., our language is already introduced in the cover decision. But thank you so much, Yunus, and I disconnect now because I don't know if the sound is good. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Teresa. Thanks a lot for also your dedication and leadership, both personally but also together with the Committee of the Regions delegation. I see another colleague raising hand, but was it Pablo from UCLG? Is he still? Yeah, Pablo. Yes, the floor is yours.
Yeah. Hi, Yunus. How are you? Again, as well, I wanted to say thank you very much for the work you have done, and really, it's amazing the level of impact we have achieved in such a, well, I wouldn't say such a, but in a bit of a hostile environment for local and regional governments. The only thing I wanted to raise is maybe more a question than anything else. How can we use this work that we have done so far to leverage advocacy at the HLPF this year, given that we are reviewing SDGs 7, 9, and 11, and I think we really need to somehow bring this work here to the HLPF.
I think, Pablo, your comment also overlapped with Eva from CMR. She has put on the chat box or Q&A. We fully agree, because when we met with the UN Secretary General on the 17th or 18th, sorry, 18th, we raised this issue about the future summit, the summit for the future, the UN Secretary General's Advisory Board for Local and Regional Governments. We should all bring those now into the process, that we help each other. So I fully agree that the debate when we prepare for COP28, especially the SDG summit, will also have to be interrelated. And I see Eva already has mentioned this as well. That's really great that you mentioned this. Carl has mentioned about our strategy to criticize COP27 failure to advance 1.5 degree. Honestly speaking, I don't think that is the right thing to do, Carl. Let me be very concrete and frank. The 1.5 degree was already in very serious jeopardy because of the war. It was not the fault of COP28, but rather the realities of the world that already was not able to raise ambition since Glasgow. There, as we have said, a number of countries already went back. There were positive things that's coming up. As I said, renewable energy has been referred a number of times. I do not want to go too much on this failure of COP27. There is, I must confess also, there is a lot of discussions about the way Global North is approaching the success of COP27, and the way the Global South is approaching the success of COP27 is a bit different. We have to make a balance on that. I believe, but happy to discuss. Maybe we have, as I said, as Teresa mentioned, we really have to go back to the summaries of all the decisions. Some of the decisions are not even on the web. We have to work on the submission deadlines. We have to see what we will be doing in the next year, and we have to have our strategic discussions. We have this, you remember, in the Global Task Force meeting in February, Barcelona. We will use this again as the opportunity, and we will continue on that. I'm aware of the time, but I see two hands raised. Heloise from Regions 4 and Dava, who already raised an issue at the beginning of the presentation. Can you please briefly address, so that we can then give the floor to Kobi to discuss about, or to hear about, the preparation for the Biodiversity Summit?
Sure, thank you, Yunus. I just wanted to thank you and everyone for really everything we did together. I think it really showed a community feeling, which is what we want from LGMA. So thank you so much. Just very quickly, and maybe we can touch upon it at the next meeting, but it's about the global stocktake and seeing what would be our plan there, and what are the expectations as well from the different partners, and inputting the global stocktake for next year. So we can develop that at the next meeting, but it would be interesting to know what is our vision.
Definitely, as we said, this model that we have proposed, we believe it could be applied really in any city or any region. The topics and the way it can be designed, and we encourage really this like a bottom-up initiative. Unfortunately, we don't have any resources at the moment, but it should be doable to the extent possible. Definitely, we will start to focus on this. It will be one of the top priorities, both the surge implementation, but the stocktake will be one of the top priorities for us in this year. The colleague Dava, you have taken down your hand. You have shared a link about SDGs and cities and climate change. We can have a look at it, but maybe I go now to Kobi. Sorry, Kobi, for your patience that we have spent too much of time, but I feel some of our colleagues can still stay for a while to listen to you. We will keep this session a bit more longer, maybe 10 more minutes further the hour, so you can have more time to address. Kobe, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Yunus. I'll be quick, and I just want to say it was also lovely for me to meet many of you in the halls and the corridors, and of course at our wonderful pavilion at COP27. And from an Africa point of view, we felt that our presence of local and subnational governments have been really very high, and the quality of sessions and the number of engagements and the voices of Africa came through very strongly. So we also delighted that the loss and damage issue is on the table, and yeah, from our perspective, we see there's concern, but we see a lot of success as well. So we come home feeling happy about the achievements of the LGMA constituency as a whole within this difficult COP. And we also think Egypt made a lot of room for the African agenda and for the Global South agenda altogether. So we are very, very pleased to have been in Sharm el-Sheikh with all of you. And while we were there, we were also, of course, working hard on planning this very important CBD COP, COP15, which is kicking off on the 7th of December in Montreal. And just for those to clarify, the presidency is China. It was decided because of the COVID policy of China mainly that they remain the presidency, but that the COP itself will be hosted by Canada. Quebec, Montreal is the place where it will take place. And that is partly, well, mostly because the Secretariat of the CBD, of the Convention on Biological Diversity, is of course situated and located in Montreal. So we will be in Montreal from early December. It runs, the COP itself runs from the 7th to the 19th. But because it's been a process delayed in many ways by COVID-19, and a lot of decisions and processes had to be done online. They are introducing an unusual open-ended working group 5, the 5th one, in between the two COPs, to enable the parties to get rid of as many brackets as possible before we head into the COP itself. So in the early days, ahead of the 7th of December, there will be an open-ended working group number 5, which we will attend together with some of you that are also the voices, advocacy voices together as the LGMA constituency in those negotiation halls. We get good speaking opportunities. There's very good recognition. There's very great appreciation from the co-chairs of the COP, of the open-ended working groups, and also of the Secretariat and the parties to the CBD. So the LGMA community is welcomed with open arms, so much so that the SCBD has given us for free, for the first time ever, a large space for a very nice pavilion. And we will have a pavilion very much like the one that we had now for the LGMA group in COP27. We will have a similar pavilion, larger in size as a matter of fact, with a full press room, etc., sponsored generously and built generously by the government of Quebec. And our partners are Government of Quebec, Montreal, of course, City of Montreal, Regions for ICLEI, and the Secretariat of the Convention. And then additional partners are the City of Kunming in China, where the COP was going to take place, and in fact, where the first part of COP15 did take place in 2021. And so Kunming is an additional partner along with UNEP. And we warmly invite all of you to join us there. The pavilion is fully packed, just like what we had in Sharm. And we are delighted to also introduce the pavilion program to you in the very next days. It starts on the 8th with a formal opening, and then the rest of the day of the 8th will be Montreal Day, and Montreal will host a series of events there on Montreal Day. The 9th is dedicated as a Quebec Day. I think the Quebec Day is going to focus more on the Francophone part of the world, and it will be conducted in French. Not all the sessions of the pavilion will be translated in different languages. The COP itself and the pavilion itself are really tailor-made for in-person participation. However, the COP discussions and negotiations will of course be live streamed and people can access that, and so would many parts of the pavilion, but there will be a delay. We will do that and we'll put it on the website, which is shared with you in the chat box. So please have a look at the links in the chat box. You can find all the necessary links to the program, to the website, etc. And then I want to come to the summit. For the first time we have a pavilion, but we also have, as usual, a summit, and this is a very high-level summit this time because we have the privilege of having a pavilion as well. The summit is elevated to a very high-level summit with speakers from around the world, governors, mayors from around the world, but also heads of UN organizations and many other organizations. The summit is taking place on the 11th and the 12th of December, and it is in one of the negotiation halls because those are the off days of the negotiations, and they're giving us one of their halls, and we're almost going to fill it because we have well over 1,000 registrations for the summit, which also sets a new record, and we're very pleased that people are coming in hundreds, in thousands, literally, to come and attend our summit and pavilion events. And it's difficult to achieve, but it's also very good that it is in such close proximity to COP27, because for me, for one, I don't think I attended a single event where nature wasn't mentioned in the events of COP27. So nature, food, all those new agendas, really water, got their time at COP27. And of course, this message is being carried through to COP15, that we cannot find a solution for climate change if we do not find a solution for the biodiversity crisis, the planetary crisis that we find ourselves in. And linking these agendas at a systemic level is pivotal for humanity's survival and well-being. And this is also a key message, but a key message of our constituency taking to COP15 is also that cities and regions are ready, and we are already in many ways leading the way, doing applying nature-based solutions for climate results and applying biodiversity actions, restoration of biodiversity and ecosystems with multiple benefits for food security, for quality of life, for health and well-being, but also for climate. And the links between these agendas, I think, have never been stronger. And this is also certainly a message that we will carry across as a constituency forward into COP15. So the summit will take place on the 11th and 12th, and this will be broadcasted live. It is not, you're not able to engage from far away as a virtual meeting, but you are able to watch it live, and it will be live streamed in languages, 4 languages. It's English, French, Chinese, and Spanish. And it will also be recorded and to be watched later. So yeah, I think those are some of the highlights of our constituency. But I think a very, very important highlight for this group to know is that there is a very strong decision on the table, which we are all hoping for, that it will pass smoothly. It's a new framework decision, a plan of action coming from the Edinburgh process and the Edinburgh Declaration, which, by the way, you can also still sign up to the Edinburgh Declaration. Thank you, Scotland, for leading this process so elegantly, so that the parties are really gathering behind this new strengthened decision for cities and subnational governments, which will provide a framework within the UN context for us as a constituency to engage with parties directly in further mobilization and further support and drastically and urgently upscaled mechanisms for implementation at the local and subnational level. I think the fact that the SCBD, as well as both the co-chairs of the open-ended working groups of COP15 came to our pavilion and spent time at our pavilion just 2 weeks ahead of their COP is an indication at the climate summit, is an indication that they take our constituency and the role that we as local and subnational governments have to play in the implementation of the new global biodiversity framework very seriously. This new global biodiversity framework, or in short, the GBF, that all parties expect to adopt there with very clear targets, etc., is very necessary because the Aichi targets basically came to an end in 2020, 21. And so now we are finding ourselves a bit in a void till the new global framework has been adopted for biodiversity, which will again set targets to the nations, reporting lines and formats, etc., will be agreed upon, and that framework will then continue to allow us to also take stock and also for us to show our ambition and our actions from the local and subnational community in the biodiversity space in the years ahead. So very important. People make the comparison that the Montreal COP15 is compared to the Paris moment for climate, and it has to be that Paris moment for biodiversity because the world cannot wait any longer to take collective action at that scale and ambition as the climate space is going. But again, what is unique about the biodiversity space is that there are already a series of decisions that the parties have taken in recognition and in support of the role of local and subnational governments. And this, of course, will continue now with the strengthened decision that we hope to see adopted. So success for us in Montreal will be a successful pavilion, a successful summit. Hopefully many of you will participate in that. We have a fantastic lineup for the summit, fantastic lineup for the pavilion program, but also very much the decisions that we hope the parties will take. There will also be a formal LGMA side event on the 7th of December, and there will be also a formal China Day at the pavilion on the 13th of December. So jam-packed programs for the summit and pavilion, and really great ambition for collective decision-making by the parties to adopt the decision, and also the other decisions throughout the GBF that at the moment refer to local and subnational governments. So thank you, for Eunice, for the opportunity, and we will provide feedback. I just want to say that in the chat box, you can also see the link to the WhatsApp group that we've created for the LGMA group. Please join that. And there will also be daily digests, which you can sign up to. So please do so. And we hope to see many of you in Montreal very soon. Thank you.
Thank you, Kobe. It is a challenge for the Africa Tech team to follow from one COP to the other. So we are appreciating your leadership and the team's efforts. But indeed, it is really an opportunity to connect these two COPs more actively, more let's say concretely. Let's be aware in many cases, the opportunity in the biodiversity process is even more helpful and much more giving us more opportunities to interact with the parties compared to UNFCCC. That's one of the reasons why we are achieving so much progress. So let's hope that the post-2020 biodiversity framework is also aligned with the climate ambition and the climate emergency, and so that we can advance. And congratulations for the pavilion. It sounds really impressive. I think there are a lot of things we are learning from each other. It's good to have the leadership of all the partners. And I heard already in the WhatsApp group that many partners who were in Sharm el-Sheikh are also continuing to be there with you. So good luck. And in case there are no other inputs, I see in the chat box some feedbacks. For example, Veronica is recommending the global stocktake. to connect NDCs and NAPs, which is exactly what we want to achieve. Daval has shared his link to his initiative, but I think there is not too much questions. We will share these links also with the mailing of our this webinar, and if not, I think we can announce that we came to the end of our webinar today. If there's no more contributions from the floor, I see no hand raised at the moment. Thank you all. Have a nice day to all of you, and we'll stay in touch and take care. Stay safe.